and welcome to Market Madness, the podcast from GiveMeSport, where every day is like deadline day with myself, Olivia Buzaglo, Joel Beya, and GiveMeSport senior football correspondent Ben Jacobs.
That's right. We are currently live on Facebook, YouTube, and X. And if you're listening back in the future, you can do that. Then make sure you're following us on @GiveMeSport. You can see when the shows go live and are taking place. And you know what? You'll be able to see what we're getting up to minute by minute as it happens. So today we're joined by the most in demand, the man in the know, the main man himself, Mr. Fabrizio Romano, will be joining us.
Yeah, and there's one question every single person wants to know the answer to, and that is, will Alexander Isak be joining Liverpool this summer? I hope the answer is no.
What about that question that they had if he's going to be joining Arsenal? Is that still a question that's flying around?
No, it's not. Sorry, Joel. It's not a question anymore.
Okay, well, as well as that, we'll be talking with French football correspondent. You know what? I'm going to say it in French with an accent. Jonathan Janson, about why Lyon finishing sixth in the league means that Crystal Palace have been demoted to the Conference League instead of the Europa League next season.
And as well as all that, this is going to be my favourite part of the show. We're going to be looking ahead to England's Euros quarterfinal tomorrow. But one more thing, Joel. Champions of the world. I bet you've been looking forward to this show, haven't you? I've only just got back from America. I got back yesterday morning, and best believe, not just for this next hour, for the next 4 years, I am going to be the most unbearable Chelsea fan with you, Joel, every single week. I can't wait.
Well, I'm glad to have you back on the show, but everything else I did not ask, by the way. I did not ask. For more info on any of the stories discussed today, head over to GiveMeSport's website and do make sure you're following us across socials. You can also get your questions and comments into us live on the show. Right, let's get into it. This is Market Madness on GiveMeSport.
So right now I'm joined, as always, by GiveMeSport senior football correspondent, the man in the know. It's Mr. Ben Jacobs. I mean, Ben, like I've been in America for the last 10 days, but your backdrop is just making me so depressed. I'm home now. Wow.
Come back, because Empire State Building, if you come back, might just turn blue again.
All right, Joel, did you see that? I don't know if you saw, but from 10 till 11 on Sunday evening, the Empire State Building turned blue for the champions of the world.
I definitely did not see that. I mean, it's you know, we're going to talk about Chelsea later on, like, as much as we can. But before we start reminiscing about Sunday night in Jersey, we need to set Ben a question. We do this every week where we ask Ben something about how to start the show and his answer at the end. So it's all based on transfers. So the question today that you got to go and find out about, Ben, is, will Nicholas Jackson be leaving Chelsea this summer? Does Liv care? And of course, if you want to hear the answer to the question of the show, please make sure you stick around to the end. Right, Liv, it's your time to talk about the Club World Cup. We would have won if we were in it, but we weren't in it. So that's
but how'd you get in it, Joel? You got to win a Champions League.
I guess you got to do things like sell training grounds to yourself.
More off.
And money.
What was the year that Chelsea won the Champions League?
We won it 2021.
Where they were kind of screwed with sanctions and punishments, and Abramovich exit, and they still won a Champions League
for 20 years. They've been conning and stealing.
I'll just say,
for 20 years.
Chelsea are now the most successful club of this century. Just to let you know, Joel. 21 trophies.
Is it really success if you're winning competitions where we're not even involved? Like, I don't want to be in the Conference League. So you winning that doesn't make me.
You can if you're in it, like, well, you might as well win it. Do you know what I mean? Like, and also, if Arsenal had been in this competition, we still would have won it because we battered PSG, and that's something you couldn't do.
We don't want to win it, and you
don't want to win the Club World Cup, no. You don't want to win the Champions League, no. Okay. No. Anyway, should we talk about Sunday night? Shall we? Up there. I mean, I've had some great days at work, but the way it still hasn't sunk. It still genuinely hasn't sunk in that Paris Saint-Germain. I said, I think me and my friend that were out there working together, both Chelsea fans, we were like, we had a feeling, and like, we didn't want to be too like vocal about it because of how good PSG have been throughout the tournament, how good they were last season. But we just had like a little inkling that we were going to do it. And I have never seen us play like that under Enzo Maresca. It was a tactical masterclass against not even just one of the best managers in the world, the best team in the world, we battered them. Like I couldn't believe my eyes. And I think they had a couple of big chances. I know the one that Doué decided to square in the first half when it was 0-0, and I was thinking, if that goes in, it's an entirely different game. And then at the start of the second half, but I mean, we were 3-0 up at that point. I couldn't believe that we were 3-0 up against PSG. Joel, did you watch the game? Genuinely,
I did. I did.
Was it a hate watch?
Let me start this in this place, right? I said to my friend, I said, I think they're going to win, And I thought you were going to win because of the backlash you were receiving. And I look at your squad, and I do think you got a good squad. And I thought, if it was me being attacked like that, my comeback, right, would be so strong. But I didn't think you would go 3-0 up. Like, I did not think you would, that would be the margin. I would have only said 2-1. And as much as I dislike Chelsea, I'm here to announce right now on Market Madness, GiveMeSport, that my favorite player in the Premier League is set in stone. It's Cole Palmer. That's it.
Oh.
That's it.
I mean, can we clip that? We need to clip that and put that all over socials. I mean,
no. We don't need to clip it.
We need to clip that, and we need to. Joel has just announced that his favorite player across the Premier League is a Chelsea player. But what I mean, Ben, I mean, I'm just in awe of Cole Palmer. I mean, when I first saw the lineup, and I think there's been so many questions that. Also, sorry, Matt, PSG were below par. I'm not having that. The reason they were below par was because of the way that Chelsea played. It was nothing to do with, to be honest, I do actually think that PSG just strolled up to that final after they did what they did to Real Madrid, after they've done what they've done to everyone in this tournament, thinking that it was just going to be a walkover. Yeah. I do believe that. And I believe that they didn't expect Chelsea to play the way they did. But listening to Cole Palmer after the game, he said, they've watched PSG, they knew where the space was, and it was down that right-hand side, and they exploited it. And every single time Cole Palmer got the ball, he was in acres of space. And the first goal was brilliant, but Ben, that second goal, the little shimmy to go and pass it to João Pedro, and it was like two identical. That is becoming Cole Palmer's trademark.
Finish.
No power behind it, just calm, composed, placed into that bottom corner. I run out of words for him, Ben. I have.
Yeah, I mean, incredible. And when we were in New York, I'm sure you saw it live as well. There were these billboards in and around Times Square that showed Cole Palmer with the phrase "scary good." And it was so apt. And I think that he made a statement because there was a lot of talk in the second half of the season that maybe he'd gone off the boil. And ultimately, Chelsea in this system, and Palmer is a 10, it's just going to allow him to thrive. And when they play with such pace and width, and also some of the deeper lying players are getting forwards into those wide areas. Malo Gusto, for example, was really important for the first goal that Palmer scored. So it's creating space. And what we saw was PSG back off because there was so much movement around and so much in the periphery of the defenders that Palmer has these two choices now as 10 every time he's on the ball. One is to fake and go alone, and it was fantastically executed, particularly, I think, the one where he left Vitinha for dead. Both his goals were obviously quite similar finishes. And then at times when he does that, defenders think, uh-oh, this guy's going to do it all alone. So then they start to commit to him. And that's when, instead of picking his spot, he was able to pick out that fantastic pass for João Pedro. And hey, what an impact Pedro's had. We don't know whether he's going to be a 9 at Chelsea, or behind the striker, a wide player, maybe a bit of everything. A lot may depend also on the form of Liam Delap and the future of Nicholas Jackson. But the point is, Chelsea got better and better in this system as I think all the new signings integrated. Delap came back from suspension. João Pedro hit the ground running because he had a personal trainer in Brazil. He scored 3 goals. If you only look at the money that has come in, you could say Chelsea have used that Club World Cup money on the João Pedro fee and also on Liam Delap because they won almost £90 million. And I think João Pedro is probably, by the way, as an aside, the only ever player that's never even visited his club training facility and yet is somehow a world champion. So all in, just fantastic for Chelsea. It started for me in the first half against Benfica when you really watched that 45 minutes long before the delay and said, hang on a minute, this system is looking good. And then they just got better and better and better and better, which is why personally I wasn't surprised that they ended up beating PSG. And now it's just about taking that momentum into the new season, because honestly, and Joel, you won't like me saying this, but if they play like they did against PSG and can replicate that across 38 games, then Chelsea will be title contenders.
First of all, shout out to Matt for trying to argue with Liv, but she wasn't having it. Matt on the show via the socials. But my question is, we have the superstar Estêvão, so shall I say, coming to Chelsea. He wants to play in the number 10 role. And, you know, everybody reckons that's his best position. What's going to happen to him playing in his favorite preferred role? And what does that mean for Chelsea in the season? I mean, I know you said they're title contenders, but isn't that going to cause a bit of friction in the team and possibly arguments?
Not necessarily. I mean, the first thing to say is that he's been a wide player for Palmeiras and he's a teenager. So if he's coming to Chelsea and going to ask to be a starting 10 from day one, I think that would go against everything I've heard about the player's character. It's true that he wants to play through the centre, but he also wants to play for Chelsea. So my expectation is that Estêvão will compete with Pedro Neto on the right. And in addition to that, now Noni Madueke has gone, will have a chance of more game time. Then through the centre, he can come on for Cole Palmer. He can compete with Cole Palmer. He can play in games where Cole Palmer is rested. So all of that feels like the right kind of pathway. Maybe the issue of Estêvão or Palmer will come more into play in a season or two if Estêvão breaks onto the scene and Palmer continues his own majestic form. But that's a great headache to have. And I think every club would like two top 10s. We have also seen Enzo Maresca, I'm sure Liv can speak more about this, be tactically flexible at times. Sometimes we've seen both Palmer and Enzo Fernandez play as advanced 8s or 10s simultaneously. So there might be a way of Estêvão and Cole Palmer playing through the centre with a tweak to the formation. But I think my expectation is that Estêvão will start in his Palmeiras role, even though it's true he wants to play through the centre. He's a great backup at 10, and his arrival called into question the future of Noni Madueke, who's now signed that 5-year deal at Arsenal. And then it may call into question the futures of the likes of Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall and Christopher Nkunku, because I do expect Estêvão to come in and be immediately part of the first team plans. So I think it's less about how do you solve a problem like Palmer and Estêvão, and more how, with Estêvão arriving, do you clear a bit of space to make sure that across a full season he gets enough minutes to keep him happy.
I think
why have you had that little smirk on your face the whole time? I've never heard you agree with Ben so much. Right,
listen, just let me enjoy being champions of the world, Joel. Just let me enjoy it. I'm still reveling in it all. It still hasn't really sunk in that we've beaten PSG, and now it's just making me excited for the season. I think Estêvão is, I think he's going to play out wide. I think it was interesting, obviously, with coming up against him and then him scoring, and it was the Chelsea players were going in tough on him in that quarterfinal. They didn't let him off, and I thought that was quite funny. But I'm excited to see. I think there's so many games next season. Obviously, forgetting that we qualified for the Champions League, didn't we? So back in that competition, and obviously all the other cup competitions as well. So, and obviously, given the players have played all the way through this tournament, you know, they're not going to have much time off. Estêvão has had a little bit more time off than the others. But I'm excited to see how this Chelsea team can go. What I would say is there are two things that shouldn't be messed with, and that is Chelsea as underdogs. If we ever go into a final as underdogs, we will beat you, whether that's Bayern Munich in your own ground, whether that's against the best team in the world in Manchester City, or whether it's against the current best team in the world that has battered absolutely everyone. You can never write this Chelsea team off when they are underdogs. And also, one other thing that's not to be messed with is Moises Caicedo with blonde hair in a final on a yellow card. Is all I will say, because Moises Caicedo, I don't care what anyone says, he was half fit, wasn't fully fit, but Moises Caicedo with blonde hair is an entirely different ball game. Can't be messing with Moises Caicedo with blonde hair. He means business when he does that. And on a yellow card, that player, he always gets booked for a tackle that's not even a yellow card. He always wins the ball and gets booked. But he will be faultless. And he absolutely ran that PSG midfield on his own with Enzo Fernandez, with Reece James. Oh my gosh. Do you hear that, Joel? Those two things shouldn't be messed with. And if you come up against any of them...
Good. He was good. He was really good.
Good. He's more than good. No, he's one of the best midfielders in the league. One of the very best.
I am a massive fan of him and Lavia. I like your players. I don't like your fans. Do you know what I mean?
We're going to be unbearable, Joel. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to say this. For the next 4 years, with that badge on our shirts, we are going to be unbearable. So at least now you know. We can at least now you know. Prepare yourself.
Another player that we should have bought, Caicedo. Like he was there for the taking.
Wanted to come to Chelsea. What can you say? Wanted to come to the...
Wow, we just cut off the Chelsea talk with a little bit of breaking news, but here we go. Chelsea, I can tell you, and we may as well stick with the Blues for now, have opened talks for Jorel Hato. This has been a target that Chelsea looked at earlier in the window and is also on Liverpool's radar as well. And my understanding is the player is keen on a move to the Premier League. Now, Ajax are quoting clubs £60 million, which is not a kind of fee that is going to be paid by either club, but both feel maybe a fee in the region of £40 million or 50 million euros might be good enough to strike a deal with Ajax. And that would be including add-ons, by the way. Hato is hoping to make a decision on his future sooner rather than later, ideally before the month is out. He doesn't want this to drag on throughout the window. 12 months ago, he was quite close to joining Arsenal, but the feeling from Arsenal, having started talks, was that Ajax would be the stumbling block and would be able to persuade the player in the end to stay another year. And that was exactly what happened. Now, Arsenal could sign a left back, and Hato is capable of playing there. But with Mosquera coming in, the notion of another young defender is downplayed by sources in the centre-back position. And that is where Ajax have played Hato at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see whether Arsenal revisit this one and say to Hato, you're a left-back predominant. From Chelsea's point of view and Liverpool, they view Hato as a left-sided centre-back capable of left-back cover, but not left-back predominant. And that is more in keeping with his development so far. There's no release clause in his current contract, and as a consequence, it will require relatively tough club-to-club negotiations. But keep an eye on Chelsea over the course of the next few weeks, because they have started recent and fresh talks for Ajax's Jorel Hato. He's muted himself again.
No, he muted.
There's an over-under every show for how many times Joel will be on mute.
And you know what? We will be giving away GiveMeSport prizes if you stick to the end of the show and you've got the exact number. Okay, cool. Ben, I want to say thank you very much for that. But I think we have to move on to the time that we've been waiting for. Yes, it's all well and good to have Liv back. Yes, it's all well and good to have Ben Jacobs' amazing view, you know, whilst we're at home here struggling with backgrounds. But we have to go to Mr. Fabrizio Romano. That's right, Shaki Salman. You're asking, where is he? Well, he is here right now. Let's go.
Fabrizio Romano is with us. Ciao, Fabrizio, working hard as ever.
Ciao, my friend, as always. How are you?
I'm good. And still, to confirm a previous window exclusive, you are operating only off one phone throughout the entire window, right?
Yeah. That remains the case. Only one.
Incredible. Well, let's start with an exclusive that you broke yesterday, and everybody is talking about it. A bomb. Alexander Isak and Liverpool, club-to-club approach. What more can you tell us? And do you sense that Liverpool will turn that approach into a formal bid?
Yeah, they are ready to present a formal bid to Newcastle. They are waiting for Newcastle now. Let's see if today, tomorrow, when is going to be the moment for Newcastle to give their final official answer to Liverpool. Their stance has always been clear for the whole summer transfer window and the recent months in general. Always mentioned that they don't want to sell the player, that they don't consider the player available on the market. So Newcastle remain in that position. But Liverpool want to try. Liverpool made an approach yesterday, spoke directly to Newcastle, confirmed their intention to offer £120 million a record fee for Alexander Isak. So for sure there is the intention to do something big in this case. And now depends on Newcastle. They have to decide what they want to do, also because from what I'm hearing, the player is not closing doors to Liverpool. I think he would be open to joining if the two clubs can reach an agreement, but again, is not on the player in this case. Is on Newcastle. They have to decide internally what they want to do, and as of yesterday, their position was still, we don't want to sell the player. So let's see what's going to happen next.
And if Liverpool can't get Alexander Isak, do you think they'll turn their attention to Hugo Ekitike, who, of course, is also a Newcastle target?
Yeah, it's a serious possibility. From what I heard, after Newcastle had a bid rejected close to 80 million euros, with Eintracht asking for more for Hugo Ekitike, Liverpool also restarted talking with the agents of the player. It was already on Monday night. Then on Tuesday, again, new contacts. He's a player who's always been in the list at Liverpool for the striker position, with Darwin expected to leave. And so I think he remains an option for Liverpool. If they can't get Alexander Isak, I think they can really turn their attention on Ekitike, who is still a target for Newcastle, because Newcastle even today remain in conversations to sign Ekitike. But obviously, if Liverpool decide to enter the race strong, especially if they can't get Alexander Isak, is going to be probably their big opportunity to get the player after they've been following him for months.
And just a small point on the price, Fabrizio, of Ekitike. We've heard for much of the window this 100 million euros asking price, but the feeling maybe from some of the interested clubs is that that number will drop as the window progresses. Newcastle's rejected offer that you broke was in the region of 70 million pounds. That's about 80 million euros. What do you think the price will end up being for Hugo Ekitike? 100 million euros or less than 100 million euros?
I think Eintracht are very happy with this situation with Liverpool and Newcastle now, because obviously this will probably help to keep the price very high. On Ekitike, the situation was quite hot at the beginning of the window with Chelsea and more clubs involved, then got quiet for almost 1 month. Now is hot again with these two clubs fighting. So Eintracht insists on 100 million euros. Then there is a sense in the industry that maybe with something close to 85, 90 millions with some add-ons, you can still close the deal and get the player. But again, at the moment, Eintracht insists on 100 million, also because they have Newcastle and potentially Liverpool involved. So for sure, it's going to be one of the big stories and cases of the upcoming days.
Let's move on to Spurs. They were very hopeful last week of completing a deal for Morgan Gibbs-White. I believe they'd even booked a medical, but now it's hit some potential legal complications. What's the latest?
Yeah, that's the case, as you explained, with Nottingham Forest not happy at all with their approach with the player. They mentioned that that was not something they expected from Tottenham. Also, how they approached the player directly to inform him about the medical and all the formal steps without having any formal exchange with Nottingham Forest. So the situation is quite tense between the two clubs. The medical was booked on Friday last week. Now, Tottenham remain confident on their chances to sign the player, but obviously now this is a legal topic. They need to discuss directly with Nottingham Forest to find a solution. And of course, it changes the timing of the deal. For Tottenham was probably the perfect plan to sign Kudus and Gibbs-White in 24, 48 hours. Now it's going to take a bit longer, probably, but they remain intentioned to sign the player. That remains their plan. And so let's see how it continues on the legal side. But for sure, Tottenham still want Morgan Gibbs-White.
Let's move on to Rodrigo. I sense that this will be a relatively big story in the second half of the window. When will he decide his future or hold a meeting with Real Madrid to at least discuss it? And is it true that Premier League clubs such as Arsenal and potentially Liverpool could enter the race?
Look, about Premier League clubs, I see many stories, but at the moment I can guarantee that no one reached out to Real Madrid yet. So there is still no negotiation, no direct talks. And also with player side, they know, of course, about the interest of Premier League clubs, but at the moment they still want to have a discussion with Real Madrid first. And the first round of discussion will be this week. From what I'm hearing, is not going to be the only one. For Rodrigo to leave Real Madrid is still not going to be something easy. He really likes Real Madrid, and so to be in this position is not something easy for the player, also for his family. It's really difficult for him to say goodbye to Real Madrid, but the position is quite clear. After 5 times, consecutive times on the bench at the Club World Cup, this is showing probably the direction. So talks will take place in the next days between Rodrigo and Real Madrid. From what I'm hearing, Real Madrid will let him decide whatever he wants. Real Madrid are not closing doors to his exit, so it will depend on the player. Let's wait for Rodrigo in this case. For sure, for Premier League, they're attentive to the situation, because having a player like Rodrigo available on the market would be huge. But from what I'm hearing, we are not yet at advanced stages of the story.
And because Arsenal have signed Noni Madueke and Ethan Nwaneri is going to renew as well, and both of those players can be versatile, Madueke on the left, Nwaneri through the centre as well. What do you think is next for Arsenal? Because fans from the Gunners will be excited by the prospect of Rodrigo, but could it actually be they turn their attention more towards a central attacking midfielder? And does that maybe make an approach for Eberechi Eze more likely than one for Rodrigo?
Yeah, for Eze, in this case, they already had several rounds of discussions with his agents. So Arsenal maintain direct contact with his agents. At the moment, from what I'm hearing, still no club-to-club contact with Crystal Palace. So in this case, it's not something advanced. I think now for Arsenal, after some exciting days, of course, signing many players, re-signing Ethan Nwaneri, now there is the Gyökeres case. So several things are happening at Arsenal. Then it's going to be time probably to sell some player. It's also important to keep the balance. And then in August to try understand what kind of opportunities there will be on the market. For sure, they spoke to the agents of Eze. Rodrigo is a player they love internally, but it's easy to sign Rodrigo with words. Then you have to reach an agreement with Real Madrid, with Rodrigo eventually on the salary. Is not a cheap deal. So Arsenal are aware of potential difficulties on this one. But for sure, Rodrigo, Eze, these are players appreciated. From what I heard, for Eze, they already had several discussions with the agents. So let's see if they decide to start talks with Crystal Palace. But I think the next step is going to be selling some players.
And just a quick word on Jean-Philippe Mateta as well. Obviously, Crystal Palace won't want to lose Eze and Mateta in the same window. Is there any truth in recent links with Mateta and Liverpool or Manchester United?
Look, at the moment for Liverpool, the two names I'm hearing are Alexander Isak and Ugo Kitike. So then if maybe they can't get these two players, we will see later in the window if Mateta can be an option. But at the moment, from what I'm hearing, is quiet on that one. And for Man United, there are several options at striker position. I think it will depend on how much they will spend on different targets for the striker. So it's going to be about the budget. Mateta is a player they considered already at the start of the transfer window as one of the options being assessed. Then Man United never made any bid to Crystal Palace or to the player. So the situation is still quite there. I think they have 3-4 options for the striker position, but now focus on closing the Beumo deal and then to understand how much they can really spend on the striker, also based on outgoings, because there is still the cases of Sancho, Anthony, Rashford, Garnacho, many things that will probably make us understand how much Man United can spend on the striker.
And on Mbeumo, could a deal happen for Manchester United before they head to America on Tuesday next week? And despite the fact that Brentford are tough negotiators and are certainly not making this one easy for Manchester United to get over the line.
Yeah, not at all, because they still insist on their conditions. Obviously, Brentford have their own reasons, but at the same time, United remain confident. So their hope is obviously to have the player for the pre-season tour. That's the mission. That's always been the mission. But at the moment, still negotiating, still in talks with Brentford. Man United remain optimistic. The player keeps waiting for Manchester United, and that's also what is giving hope to the club to see the player that committed on the opportunity to go to Man United. Now, obviously, it's on the clubs. The conversation is still ongoing, from what I'm hearing, on daily basis, trying to reach an agreement. So let's wait and see about the timing. But for sure, Man United will try to make it happen in time for the pre-season tour.
And last up, what might unlock the Mbeumo situation is if Brentford have a replacement. We know that their top target is Amari Hutchinson, but yesterday his £35 million relegation release clause expired and there's still no deal between the clubs. Do you still expect Brentford and Amari Hutchinson to happen?
I think it still has a chance, yes, because the clause is expired, but Brentford want to return to the table to try and negotiate terms with Ipswich. Obviously, Ipswich want to keep the player, fantastic player, but at the same time, it's Premier League opportunity. Brentford are prepared to invest important money, and so in this case, I think the player is still hoping, from what I'm hearing, to go to Brentford. He will still push to go to Brentford, so there will be more round of talks. They will try to discuss payment terms. That was the problem with the £35 million proposal sent yesterday. But Omari is a top target for Brentford. They will have fresh money for sure, so I expect them to return to the table. Yes.
Top stuff, Fabrizio. Keep dropping those bombs and look forward to speaking to you in a couple of weeks' time. Remember to follow Fabrizio via his newsletter. You can scan the QR code to ask him a question. And of course, keep in touch with all his social channels as well. But for now, Fabrizio, thanks again, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, guys, and see you soon. Ciao.
Ciao.
So there you have it. That's what you guys have been waiting for. Up to the minute transfer news from the big man himself, Fabrizio Romano. I mean, I remember on this exact pod, we were talking about how Alexander Isak would be a perfect fit Sorry, I don't know if you can hear that. There's like building works going on outside my house. I'm going to close the window in just a second after I've asked Joel, what do you think about this potential Alexander Isak to Liverpool? Just first of all, I just want to say, like, how mad of Liverpool to basically go to Newcastle and be like, if you don't give us your striker, we're just going to go after the striker you want anyway. So make your mind up which one it is.
I think that's super gangster, if I'm honest with you. Like, it's good stuff, and I love the rivalry and a little bit of pressure because I think everyone's too nicey in football nowadays anyway. But Isak potentially going to Liverpool, I mean, I'm not really surprised. If you're Isak, you're going, they've done their business early with Frimpong, with Kirkes, with, Verts. Like, you can see the plan. There's one thing somebody telling you about a plan, but then there's another thing about actually seeing the plan, and he's probably the missing part to the jigsaw at the current moment. Obviously with the death of the recent player, RIP, it means that they might not sell Nunes, but besides that, the squad is so strong and ready to go, really. So yeah, I if I'm Isak, that's the place to go. Really
they're in a good position though, Newcastle, aren't they? Really, because he's still got 3 years left on his contract. Yeah. So they're not in a position right now where they need to sell. And obviously, I think the whole thing about the Champions League, like them getting Champions League, was a big thing. Like, and if they didn't, I'm sure Isak would probably be off. But I mean, I can't really see a world in which they sell Isak to Liverpool, even if they do go and get Ekitike. Like, why would they do that, Ben? Would they do that?
Yeah, I mean, Hugo Ekitike has been a Newcastle target dating all the way back to 2023. And before he joined PSG, the outlay required for Ekitike will be a club record for Newcastle. So they may consider whether or not the money for one big player going somewhere is worthwhile. Whether that's Alexander Isak, it remains to be seen. They've signed Anthony Elanga. So there are some question marks about how all these attackers will fit in. You've got interest from some clubs in Harvey Barnes, who finished the season really strong. You had Man City making approaches towards the Tino Livramento camp, and Newcastle shut that door. There's been lots of rumours in the past about Man City and also even Arsenal looking at Bruno Guimaraes. So I think suitors realise that Newcastle's stance now may be different if two things happen. One of these big names actually says, I want the move. And two, if by spending such a big outlay on a player like Ekitike, if that gets over the line, the position changes. So I think Liverpool are being opportunistic. They're not giving up. They're prepared to make another British transfer record package for Isak. And then a lot will really depend upon testing Newcastle's resolve and getting quick clarity. So if it isn't to be Isak, they can move to other targets. And second of all, does Isak, when there's a formal offer on the table, say to Newcastle United, actually, I want to go? And when Wesley Fofana said to Leicester, I want to leave, he got his move. When Moises Caicedo said he wanted Chelsea, he got his move. Morgan Gibbs-White has said he wants to leave. It's a bit more complicated because there's legal challenges. But 9 times out of 10, when a player says they want to go, all of the data you run, all of the planning goes out the window. And it might be the same with Liverpool and Luis Diaz as well, because it's one thing saying we're planning for Isak, it's one thing saying we're planning for Luis Diaz. But if that player actually says, I want to go, then what's their mentality like? And is it the beginning of the end? And if they don't go now, do they end up going anyway in 12 months' time? So I think Newcastle's perspective will be that right now they want Isak and Ekitike, and they want to hope that in 12 months' time, Isak and Ekitike get them to a point in the Champions League and qualifying for it again, and in the Premier League, where they basically are consistently within that big six, as opposed to Champions League, no Champions League, back in the Champions League. Because when you yo-yo like that, it's a bit harder to keep hold of your big players. So that's the best case scenario for Newcastle. But if they get Ekitike and a crazy offer comes in, let's see whether that perspective changes. And one thing I would say finally about Liverpool is they tend not to waste their time on deals because the way they read the market is usually outstanding. And therefore, if they make a bid, it probably won't be blind, and it's unlikely to be one for show and optics before they move on. If they never make that bid, it's usually an indication they just respect Newcastle's position is firm and unchangeable. And then it might be one that they visit instead in 12 months' time. So that's the next clue in all of this, because unlike some other clubs that just bid for show, bid for optics, bid out of bullishness, Liverpool don't really get themselves involved in those games and noise. So usually when a formal bid comes, it tells you the club think there's a genuine chance of success. And that's obviously the next step in this saga to look out for.
Oh, I don't really don't want that to happen. Anyway, if you want more news as it happens, make sure you follow GiveMeSport and at Fabrizio Romano on socials.
Just a bit of information here on Nottingham Forest. My understanding is to counter Tottenham's desire to get that deal done that I referenced a moment ago, Forest are to make a new contract offer to Morgan Gibbs-White. Now, over the last 12 months, they've tried to get Gibbs-White to extend, and in doing so, not only offer him improved terms, but remove the release clause 60 million, which is in his current deal, that Forest felt was secret and could only be learnt of by coming to them. But Tottenham obviously got wind of it and therefore indicated that they were going to trigger it. Now we have to wait and see what happens. Gibbs-White's keen on Spurs. If the parties can resolve it, whether via the clause or maybe even a different amount, then Gibbs-White's willing to go and do that Tottenham medical that was scheduled and then cancelled. But Forest haven't given up on keeping Morgan Gibbs-White. Now, a few points here. The first is people will say, why is the clause just not valid? If it exists, Tottenham can trigger it. But there's a mechanism for triggering it. And if you aren't told about it in writing by Nottingham Forest, then Forest's argument is that Tottenham must have learnt it from the player side. And effectively, players agree to confidentiality and not sharing that piece of information, which is why Forest are exploring their legal options. And these kind of clauses tend to be secret until a certain threshold is either met or an advancement in negotiations between the clubs, if it's more amicable, has happened. In other words, if you bid 40, you get told no. But if you get within 5 of the clause, that threshold means Forest are obligated to tell you about the 60 million clause. If you go above the clause, they may be obligated to say you've got the option to also trigger the clause for a lower amount. And that's the complication in all of this, that if Forest haven't told you the information, how have you got the information? And that's Forest's argument, even though Spurs deny any wrongdoing. So option 1 is that they resolve it, whether legally or otherwise, then Gibbs-White will join and his clause will be triggered. Option number 2 is Tottenham say, okay, we're giving up on the clause and therefore we'll offer you 61, 62 with different payment terms. And maybe Forest say, okay, we've got a little bit more money, we'll sanction it that way. Option number 3 is what happened with Michael Olise and Chelsea, where Chelsea thought they triggered Olise's clause a year before he ended up then subsequently going to Bayern. But Crystal Palace alleged that Chelsea had gone about it in the wrong way. Chelsea backed off. And what happened? Michael Olise signed a new deal. So Forest are hoping a similar scenario happens. They've had no breakthrough yet, but they will in the next sort of few days or weeks offer Gibbs-White a brand new deal once again with improved terms to see whether or not he will commit and at least stay for another year. Tottenham still hoping they can get it over the line and that scenario doesn't happen. And we should get a bit more clarity on the Gibbs-White situation by the latter part of next week, I'm told.
Oh, interesting. Definitely one to keep an eye on then. Thank you for that, Ben. Now, of course, we talked about Chelsea earlier. Of course we did. But they aren't the only team who are looking to land some silverware this month, as the Lionesses overcame an opening defeat against France to qualify second in their group. They, of course, beat the Netherlands and then Wales on the way, and they will play Sweden tomorrow in Zurich in the quarterfinal.
Man, you know, I've seen a couple of the games. I missed the game on Sunday for obvious reasons because I was trying to do a successful hate watch, but I am aware that there is a quarterfinal happening. I know that if England can beat Sweden, who are a tough opponent, and they've won all 3 of their group stage matches, they'll face either Italy or Norway, and that could be all. That's what they need. Obviously, Sweden, they're likely to win the game, and they could then meet Spain in the final for a replay of that World Cup final from 2 years ago.
Yes, I mean, what a game that would be. Of course, we wish England all the best in their quarterfinal. Reminder, that game kicks off at 8 p.m. UK time tomorrow evening. So we wish the Lionesses the best of luck, hoping they can make it through to the semi-finals.
All right, and this is Market Madness from GiveMeSport. Now, okay,
Delighted to be joined by French football expert Jonathan Johnson back on the show. JJ, how are you?
Yeah, doing very well, thanks. And yourself? Thanks a lot for having me back on. Always look forward to these appearances.
Yeah, always great to talk to you. We'll be speaking about Chelsea beating PSG in the Club World Cup and whether that's a statement win or the Champions League champions are still the dominant force in European, if not world football. But there's only really one place to start, and that's this saga, the only way of describing it, between Lyon, Crystal Palace, John Textor, and now, as we know, a provisional relegation for Lyon, which has been overturned, and a at least provisional demotion of Crystal Palace from the Europa League to the Europa Conference League for an alleged multi-club breach, subject potentially to appeal at CAS. So where to start with this? Because it's an incredibly complicated saga. I guess Lyon, first of all, was there ever really any danger that they would have been relegated to League Two?
I think when you look at what's happened in the last couple of years in France, it would be silly to say that there was no danger at all of Lyon being relegated to Ligue 2. I think there is, previous examples of clubs where people have said, oh, they're too big to be relegated, and ultimately they have been relegated. So you've got Bordeaux, for example, who are in the semi-professional 4th tier in France at the moment because of their financial issues. So to say that, Lyon was sort of too big to fail, I think only had kind of limited value, but Lyon are a French footballing institution, as Bordeaux are, and a lot of people mobilized to make sure that the initial verdict from the DNCG, so just sort of breaking it down for anyone who's perhaps not too familiar with the way that French football works, the DNCG is essentially the financial watchdog that keeps an eye on all teams' budgets. They do checks twice per year, so once in the summer, hence, sort of this situation being created, and once in the winter, sort of at the midpoint during the season, to make sure all the clubs are on track. And Lyon have fallen foul of some of those checks in the last couple of years, certainly since John Textor and Eagle arrived at the club. And there were warning signs, sort of when we go back to the last winter. There was essentially a verdict handed down of provisional relegation to Ligue 2. So people were aware that Lyon's financial situation was not great, and that on top of potential qualification for European competition, selling a number of key players was also going to be necessary in order to bring in as much cash as possible. And basically, it created a very messy situation where, despite a very respectable performance during the season on the pitch, Lyon came into this off-season essentially unsure as to what the future was going to hold, because so much depended on how the meeting between John Textor and the DNCG went. Obviously, we know that the first meeting didn't go particularly well, but upon appeal, Lyon were able to, turn the situation around and ultimately safeguard their place, not only in Ligue 1, but obviously in the Europa League as well. So during that time, something that enabled, the situation to change was the fact that John Textor resigned from his position in terms of the sort of day-to-day leadership and management of the club. And there's now a situation where Lyon can at least, look towards this summer, building towards another season in Ligue 1, and also, with that involvement in the Europa League, but also knowing that there is still serious need for big sums of money to come in as quickly as possible.
So how do Lyon go from being provisionally relegated, which presumably had looked at their finances at the time of the decision, to having that decision quickly overturned? And is it fair to say that John Textor's Crystal Palace sale, which put money into Eagle Holdings, helped Lyon's financial situation? So actually the exit from Crystal Palace might have made a difference between Lyon going down and losing their Europa League place compared to staying up and keeping it.
I think it did make a big difference. I also think the timing, had it been, done much earlier, when Textor, made it very clear that he was looking to move on from what I believe he termed as the most expensive season ticket in football at one point. If that had happened a lot earlier, say at the end of last year or the beginning of this year, the situation might have been a lot clearer, and Palace might not have found themselves in this predicament. But the sale of that minority stake in Crystal Palace was always going to be key to Eagles' attempts to sort of convince the DNCG of Lyon's improved financial situation. The other thing that I think is also, worth keeping in mind at this moment in time is that the situation in France financially right now is particularly perilous. It is very, very tricky for all professional clubs. So not just Lyon, clubs as big as PSG and, some of the smaller clubs as well on the professional footballing spectrum in France. All of them are faced with the same challenge. And that is that when they go before the DNCG proposing their budgets for the coming season, they cannot factor in any TV rights money at this moment in time. Now, the TV rights situation domestically is starting to turn around and look a little more positive as of the last few days and weeks, but that doesn't mean that there's an overnight solution to what's been, quite a difficult issue for French professional clubs over the last couple of years now. And on top of not being able to budget with any TV revenue, also, the French clubs are not able to suggest that they're going to earn a certain amount of money in terms of summer transfer activity because of the risk that those summer transfer activities are either less prolific than stated during the interview with the DNCG, or that the final amount that's proposed during the summer is not met essentially by these clubs, because then suddenly there would be massive financial problems that the DNCG will have essentially created by validating budgets that were completely unrealistic. So that's also another consideration when trying to untangle this very messy situation. But really, essentially, I think the thing that has complicated Palace and Lyon's participation in Europa League at the same time the most was the fact that this situation was talked about for a long time, but only sorted out literally sort of days before Lyon were going before the DNCG. And, the expectation that despite agreeing the deal to sell the minority stake in Crystal Palace, being in place, it takes a long time for the deal to actually sort of be signed, sealed, delivered, completed, money transferred, and all of that. And that was one of the biggest concerns that the DNCG had when looking at Lyon and listening, to the fact that the situation had changed very recently, and ultimately didn't feel that they were sort of presented with enough of a concrete picture of Lyon's financial situation at that moment.
So where do you think all this leaves Crystal Palace?
Well, it's hugely unfair on Palace, because obviously it was a huge achievement for them winning the FA Cup, and deserving of their place in the Europa League. But, sort of to the letter of the law, certainly with regards to UEFA's explanation, Lyon's higher position finish in Ligue 1 ultimately, has counted in their favour ahead of Palace. And again, it brings me back to the same point that had this situation been sorted out much earlier, I think before around March time, then Palace probably would be able to compete in the Europa League because they wouldn't be judged to be, a conflict of interest. So essentially, this is a situation of sort of Textor's, creation, given that it's taken so long for him to shift that minority stake in Palace, despite being very vocal, publicly and privately about his desire to move on from that. So now it's essentially left Palace in a really unfair situation where they are looking extremely likely to be playing in the Conference League next season, which, okay, at least is still some form of European competition. But, I think their exploits on the pitch, and the memorable day at Wembley, triumphing and lifting the FA Cup, I do think that they deserve their place in the Europa League. And perhaps with that appeal going to CAS, maybe, they will see sense and ultimately, reinstate Palace to the Europa League. But as things stand at this moment in time, by the letter of the law laid out by UEFA, because Lyon finished higher in Ligue 1 last season than Palace did, than Palace did in the Premier League, that's ultimately the reasoning why, Lyon are being pushed forward to the Europa League ahead of Palace.
Let's move on to PSG. No doubt, JJ, you saw the Club World Cup final and their loss to Chelsea. Fantastic wins, though, over Real Madrid and also Atletico. What do you make now of this PSG project? Rivals are calling them the best team in the world. Is that fair? Or do we have to take into account the fact that even though they won the Champions League and they reached the Club World Cup final, in that Champions League, they also had some inconsistent performances in the league phase. And in many ways, and contrary to most people's predictions, they were outclassed by Chelsea in that final.
Yeah, they were. I think, there can be no real argument about the result in the final. It'll be hugely disappointing for, PSG to have gone all the way to a final and then to have underperformed like that. But also, I think, they will take into account that it's been an extremely long and taxing season. Obviously, the conditions in the US as well, were very challenging for a number of teams. And I think it's no real surprise that when you look at PSG and Chelsea's, squads, both are extremely deep in terms of the talent pool that both of the respective managers can choose from. So ultimately, it wasn't a huge surprise that both sort of went the furthest in the competition in the challenging conditions and at the end of a very long and arduous season. But I do think in terms of the argument over sort of PSG's position within Europe at the moment, I think PSG are definitely one of Europe's best sides. I think they've definitely been Europe's most informed side now for, the best part of the last, half a year or so, certainly since the beginning of 2025. Whether or not they can maintain that momentum going into the new season, it's going to be very challenging because the turnaround now with no real off-season and time for the players to rest before having to come back and do the conditioning work necessary to start the new campaign, is going to be very short. But, PSG are certainly in a position now where they can build on, this immense success that they've enjoyed, almost a complete clean sweep of potential trophies, obviously just falling short at the last minute in the Club World Cup. But, it also leaves, I guess, an objective for the club in the future, to try and replicate the success from this season and ultimately add sort of the world title at some point in the future, the next time the Club World Cup comes around. So in terms of where PSG stand right now, I do still think that they are absolutely one of Europe's top sides. I don't think the defeat in the final will completely, destroy all of the progress made. And they're going to be going into next season with a target on their backs. They are the dominant force in domestic football in France, winning both Ligue 1 and the Coupe de France. But also, now marking themselves out as one of the real true contenders season upon season in the Champions League. That's going to have a lot of people sort of queuing up to take a shot at them and try and upset them. And given sort of how young this PSG squad is and the stage at which they've enjoyed immense success with this new project that's focused on youth and a lot of domestic based talent as well, I think it's going to be a huge challenge now for Luis Enrique and his staff and the players to maintain that success and to be as competitive next season. So, there is a lot, of questions still to be answered about PSG, but at this moment in time, I really don't see, despite the result against Chelsea, many teams in Europe at the moment that can say that they are in better form than PSG, certainly not over the last 6 months or so.
And just finally, JJ, Ousmane Dembele, favourite or even a lock-in for the Ballon d'Or?
I mean, I feel he's a very strong favourite. I mean, you look at his contribution to PSG's success last season. You look at the way that he contributed in so many of the key games, really, in the Champions League run to the final. And I think contributing as well to a goal in the final itself. I don't see any other players who have made as much of an individual improvement in terms of his consistency and his contributions overall, but also being part of a collective success like PSG's as well. I think there's so many things sort of pointing in his favor, to potentially win the Ballon d'Or, and especially given that it's not an international year, I really struggle to see how anybody could sort of overtake Dembele at this moment in time, given, certainly his form since the turn of the year. So for me, it feels like he's an extremely strong favourite.
Top stuff, JJ. Always enjoy your insights. And where can people follow your fantastic work if they're not scandalously already doing so?
Well, the best place to find me is on Twitter/X, so at @JON_Legosip. That's still the best place to find me, sharing all of my various bits and pieces, of course, on Blue Sky as well. So you can find me over there at Jonathan Johnson as well. So that's probably the two best places to find my work at the moment.
Great stuff. Look forward to speaking to you soon, JJ. Keep up the good work, and thanks again for your time. This is Market Madness on GiveMeSport.
Yeah, huge thanks to Jonathan Johnson there for joining us. He's brilliant, and I think he's right in everything he says. I think Ousmane Dembele for Ballon d'Or is going to be interesting, and of course, all of us here will be following that Palace story really closely as it sort of goes on.
Oh, second time.
No, he's done it again. He's done it again.
I was just grimacing my face, and I was saying, as Ben, you mentioned earlier on, scandalous if you're not following Jonathan Johnson. I really love that line. But of course, at the start of the show, we asked you, Ben, a Chelsea-related question. Will Nicholas Jackson be leaving Chelsea this summer? And I added my little twist on top of it. Does Liv care? Can you please let us know what the answer is?
I mean, Liv, maybe you should go first. Answer your part of the question. Do you care?
I mean, do I care? Do I care? I believe that there is a player in there. I've watched him for the last couple of seasons, and I think that there is something in there. Obviously, he's had a few discipline problems in terms on the pitch, a couple of red cards. That one against Newcastle was, I don't even want to talk about that because that was at the time the biggest game of the season, and he knows he let everyone down in that game. And also the red card in the Club World Cup as well was so unnecessary. But buying Liam Delap and buying João Pedro has come at the worst time for Nicholas Jackson, because they got their chances when he was suspended, and they've both taken them with both hands, I think. So I think going forward, it does look like Liam Delap and João Pedro are Chelsea's 1 and 2 in terms of number 9s. But I do still think there is something he can offer Chelsea, but I'm just worried now that he's that far down the pecking order that he's not really going to get much of a chance to show it. And if it is, it'll be in like the League Cup and the FA Cup. And I don't know whether that's enough for Nicholas Jackson. So I think he will go. Am I happy with Liam Delap and João Pedro? Absolutely, yes.
Or so political. Go on, Ben. You go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Nicholas Jackson isn't untouchable. And obviously, if Chelsea see both him and Christopher Nkunku depart, and the latter is expected, then they'll move in the market for another striker. So it's going to be one to watch. It's Newcastle and potentially Liverpool that are pushing for Hugo Ekitike, but he's on Chelsea's list as well. It's hard to think, to be perfectly honest, if Alexander Isak becomes genuinely available in the market and those departures happen, that Chelsea wouldn't consider some kind of hijack, if we can call it that. Although at the moment, I've got no indication other than appreciation, and there's big money involved in that deal. But Chelsea would have outgoings money and Club World Cup finances as well. But right now, it's a fluid situation because Chelsea are not out there going, let's find another number 9 in the Jackson mould. They're happy with Jackson. They value Jackson. But if the right opportunity comes around and it suits all parties, then maybe they would sanction a sale. We know Manchester United have appreciation. It's nothing more than that at this stage. Juventus have looked in the past, but they've obviously strengthened in other areas by bringing in Jonathan David. So I don't expect them to enter the race. Milan are still looking for an attacker, and really a lot will depend upon the valuation, because Chelsea are not desperate to sell, but an exit cannot be discounted. And then if Jackson goes and Nkunku goes, there'll be funds to move in the market. But it might be that the Ekitike situation is actually moving too fast for Chelsea. And it may well be that the Isak situation is more about groundwork from Liverpool, where if they're successful, they've already got a lot of buy-in from the player side, who's certainly not shut the door, as Fabrizio put it, to move to Liverpool. So if Chelsea add another attacker, let's sort of wait and see the kind of profile, because they might even go for a Garnacho type player, even though they've added Jamie Gittins. Or alternatively, they might U-turn a little bit, because my understanding basically when Liam Delap arrived was that Benjamin Sesko, who Chelsea really appreciate and is not now going to Arsenal, was a target that Chelsea not only tried for 12 months ago, but were prepared to revisit. Delap became their number 1. After Delap arrived, it was very much Sesko is out of the picture because you got Jackson and you got Delap, and Sesko would be too similar to those two. If Jackson goes, then maybe because João Pedro is the more versatile kind of attacker, they pivot and give some kind of reconsideration back to Sesko again. So Chelsea will have options. And like I say, Jackson's not transfer listed. He's not being forced out. It doesn't appear that anything is imminent at this point. But there are interested clubs, and we definitely can't discount an exit between now and the end of the window.
This is why I say Chelsea needs to be investigated, because how are you going to go for Rodrigo? You could still be going for Benjamin. It just doesn't make sense to me.
We just won the Club World Cup. We just made about £100 million still. So
doesn't mean anything. You always find a loophole somehow. But anyway,
we're like the best. We're like the best. Did you see that? Did you see that the other day? Like the graph of like who are like best set in terms of FFP, and we're at the top.
It's insane. Anyway, I want you guys to let us know what you think, because I'm sick and tired of hearing what Liv has to think. That's it for today, guys. Thank you for tuning into the show. We'll catch you again in 1 week's time. And as usual, we'll be talking about the biggest football transfer stories with top guests. I'm not going to lie, guys. This has been one of my favourite shows for obvious reasons. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope everyone else has too. You can watch us live on YouTube, X and Facebook. Just search Give Me Sport, or you can listen back on your podcast app of choice. All you have to do is search for Market Madness. For more info on any of the stories we've discussed and so much more, head to GiveMeSport.com. Thank you very much, Joel. You can go and have a little cry now. Ben, enjoy the rest of your time in New York. I'm still very jealous. And we will see you all next time. Bye-bye.